Hello, I'm Dr. Terry Simpson, and today we're talking about genetically modified organisms and your food supply. There are some things you should be worried about and some things you shouldn't be worried about. Let's start. Consumer Reports came out and they said that they endorse labeling of food as to whether it has genetically modified organisms or not, and I agree. We should know where our food comes from, the principles of our food, but first we ought to know a little bit about GMO, or genetically modified organisms. This is where a scientist takes the gene from one organism and places it into another. Let me give you an example. You probably used Roundup before on weeds that come up around in your lawn. Spray them with a little bit of Roundup, and sooner or later, about 3 days, the weed is gone. It's a little miracle herbicide that's used. Well, there are weeds that are resistant to that, and so what they discovered is that there's a gene that codes for that resistance. Scientists took that specific gene and spliced it into corn so that farmers could then take corn genetically modified that had the Roundup gene in it and spray that corn with Roundup, and then they would have to use less other herbicides on their plants. Non-GMO corn uses 5 times the number of chemicals that are used for that herbicide. So what's the concern? The concern is super weeds, because weeds are able to genetically modify themselves over time. That is, those weeds that are resistant will tend to grow. So ultimately, we will have Roundup resistant weeds. You've probably seen the silly little photograph that's going around showing 2 pieces of corn, one that's been eaten, one that hasn't. The one that hasn't is genetically modified. Well, that's just a bogus thing. Squirrels don't have the ability to tell genetic modified corn from any other corn. And in fact, all corn is genetically modified. Genetic corn started out as a plant, Z maize, which was uneatable, undigestible, and Native Americans modified it over years to those delicious things that we use today to do everything from feed ourselves, feed our cattle, feed fish, and even popcorn. But what we do have to worry about is this: processed foods. Corn's used a lot in processed foods, and processed foods have a lot of high calories. So when we label foods, it's nice to know how many calories they have. And that increase to processed foods, things like Doritos and stuff that have GMO, I'm less concerned about that than I am concerned about their processed food. The other one is people say, well, we're going to get all these frankenfoods, and they talk about the tomato fish. And they say, this is why tomatoes don't taste, because they've been crossbred with the Arctic char so that they can be resistant to cold. Well, in fact, that's an urban myth. There is no tomato fish. But GMO is even coming to salmon. And the concern always is when you have food supplies, if you have proper labeling, you want to know, does this salmon that we're eating have as much of the things in it that we need, that we like salmon for? Salmon, for example, has a lot of omega-3 fatty acids, and you want to make sure that your food supply has all the good stuff in it that you want. People also worry about Monsanto, the evil company that sells all these seeds. Well, maybe it is an evil company. I think probably maybe it is or maybe it isn't. I don't know. But are more concerned about is food diversity. As you have more and more pieces of food that are genetically modified so they express certain things to avoid other things, you lose some of the genetic diversity. So being able to keep food that has a wide diversity is good for us and good for the environment. Another one is the Bt toxin. Bt is a toxin that is sprayed onto plants that are organically grown. It's safe for human beings. And so people say, well, let's take that and put it into uh, cotton, which has been done, Bt cotton. People are concerned about that, but it's been proven safe. But here's the bad side of it. The bad side is Bt toxin is not safe for monarch butterflies. It's not safe for honeybees. So there's been a decrease of that. Thankfully, scientists are catching up and finding some other types of things that just keep the pests away, pheromones that are being now tested and tested on humans. Genetically modification is like any advance in science. It is not wholly bad and it is not wholly good. It can be used for good in our food supply so that we can feed a hungry planet or feed the next people on the next hungry planet, but it also can have some downsides and needs to be tested. But genetic modification is here to stay. It can be done by anybody in any laboratory at any time. I know because I did some of the first genetic modification from one species to another 5 years before they started doing plants. And today that technology is widely available to anybody. It can be done in a garage. It's here to stay, but it's okay to have it labeled. For your doctor's orders, I'm Dr. Terry Simpson. Good day.